Hello world of YouTube, and welcome to the 3rd year anniversary episode of my show Redacted, where I sit down and take a look at records that have a solid foundation but a spotty execution and making a smoother listening experience out of an album. Thank you. Thank you to everybody that likes this show. You know, some episodes obviously do better than others, but generally the people that watch this show really enjoy it, and I'm happy to hear that. I love doing this show. It's like one of my favorite things that I sit down and make once a month. I'm glad that I could sit down, look at music in a different way, and express that on here. I love seeing your guys' redactions if you have them as well. And I like getting the requests that I do for them because sometimes they do challenge me in this format. But last month, I did do a request, and I wanted to do something a little more challenging for myself this year to celebrate the show. I'm not just taking a look at a record that I like, I'm taking a look at a record that I love, like one of my favorite albums, if not my favorite album, by a band that I hold really close and near and dear to my heart. But it's a record that is infamously one of the most popular double albums and is a lot in one package. But I'm going to try my best to keep that foundation in place while I take a look at and do a redacted on my favorite Beatles album. It is the classic from 1968, their 9th album, The White Album. Now guys, I know, the Beatles are such a beloved musical act. Why do this? Because I like the challenge. I like the prospect of taking a look at something that I enjoy and still putting it in this format. Not to say that no album is sacred, but you know, if I can do something with it, I'm gonna try to. You know, that's why I started Microdacted as a fun little shitposty version of this show. You know, and I couldn't think of a better candidate for this topic because one, I don't talk about the Beatles much, but I really like the Beatles. I think they're a great band. They weren't in my top 11 favorite bands of all time video, but they were high up there for consideration. I do really like this band's catalog early and late, but the White Album is my favorite record, if not only for how ambitious it really tries to be, and how many hits it really has amidst all of those experimentations. But when looking at this record, my overall philosophy was, how can I keep it experimental, or what offshoots can I include while having it be a little more of a tight, unified listening experience? You know, that was my ultimate goal when I looked at approaching this project. But today, I'm going to be rearranging and trimming the White Album, including adding some other shit. And that may sound a little weird, but if you look at how I did it, it'll make a lot of sense. My version of the White Album is 17 songs and 1 minute and 4 minutes long. So let's go ahead, look at the track listing, and go over why I put where I put it in the track listing.
Savory you know the place. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these on his hobnail boots, lying with his number 9, number 9, number 9. Step for me and my monkey. Say it's your birthday. For you.
Revolution is the center point of this project. Now, I'll talk about the specific songs I cut and talk about why they didn't end up on this version in a beefier portion after I go over the track listing. I know I talk about it in bursts and chunks when I get done with the track listing, but this record is kind of its own thing. So, but I opened the record with Revolution because it's sort of a multiple planting and payoff moment throughout the album. It acts as sort of the centerpiece for the album to be built around. And it's a great single. I like this version of Revolution. It might be my favorite version. I like number 9 and Revolution 1 fine enough. But I like this version, and I use it as sort of the throttle point for the album as a whole. It starts off with that same guitar groove, but it's a faster driven jam, and I feel like it's something that could be enjoyed as like a great kick open the door moment that follows up with another banger, Back in the USSR. You know, I love Back in the USSR. I think it's a good starting point, but I feel like following Revolution into that just carries the momentum so very well before following it up with its follow-up point on the record. It's one of the few things, if not the only thing, I think I kept in place with itself into Dear Prudence, a good sort of come down off of the rambunctious energy that started this record off. It's a bop. A lot of people know Dear Prudence, and I felt like it's easily one of the more well-known and accessible moments from this era, so I kept it in here. Before going into another really pretty soft moment that is fantastic and shows off a little more of the additional accompaniment that may crop up on this record with Martha My Dear, a great piano-driven song that is also very catchy and sweet and sugary. It's just a great, another sort of soft follow-up to Dear Prudence. Before getting a little more serious, a little more heady, a little more sad, following, again, not ramping up in energy, but definitely ramping up in emotional weight with While My Guitar Gently Weeps. A beautiful song that, again, similarly to Dear Prudence, another highlight from this era as like a most popular from this era moment. George Harrison's one of his best songs, regarded by some, and I knew I had to put it in here. And I figured while we were having all this buoyancy and sort of energy and high positivity, I'd add a little bit of sadness in there, because the Beatles do that so incredibly well at points, and While My Guitar Gently Weeps, I felt like the best point for that part to come in before we just get weird. We go from this great emotional weight and heaviness to John Lennon shitposting, basically. Glass Onion, a song that is very much one of the more trippier ideas on this lyrically, with John throwing out the Walrus's Paul line and shit like that. It's John doing John shit. While having a great foundation, this song has some great sad swells with strings. It's got some punchy drums. It's got a good suspenseful build to it with the oh yes, and I wanted to have that sort of offshoot from While My Guitar Gently Weeps into a weird realm before coming back to Blackbird. It's a buffer, so that way there's no huge tonal whiplash from the sadness of While My Guitar into Blackbird. I needed Glass Onion to sort of act like a buffer between these two emotional points, and I feel like it works effectively. It sort of acts as a weird sonic diversion before returning to a little more intimacy and normalcy with a beautiful song of Blackbird, another really popular moment from this era, another bop. Again, just a great intimate acoustic jam that I love so very much. But I carry sort of the minimal swell from that into the minimal beginning of Happiness is a Warm Gun, another song that kind of has this foreboding tone beneath it, and obviously the song itself has this like sort of sinister style to its presentation that felt poignant to bring up at this point in the album tonally, because from there it acts as sort of a send-off to Side A. Side A has been very hodgepodgey, but with this unifying sense of momentum to it, whether it's shifting in emotional tones into something else, or to carrying some energy into some great softer swells to follow. But from there, we go to it. We go to the next focal point, the next Revolution focal point in Revolution 9, when it acts as the centerpiece that splits both halves of it, as it were. You know, I still tried to conceptualize it as a double album, but I kept Revolution 9 as like the middle point of it. You all know what it is. It's here as sort of an intermission, as it were, or again, a sort of break, like the deepest point of experimentation, because from up to this point in the side A, as it were, you have a combination of some punkier, proto-punk energy, some grand emotional swells, both acoustic and intimate, and grand and flourishments with accompaniment. You've got a myriad of emotions being played with at here, songwriting-wise, and I wanted to act this as sort of the biggest deviance from the norm, deviance from everything in the sound collage style that retains points to cement it to Revolution, the opener, and Revolution 1, which comes up later on in my track listing. But from that point, I had to really think of where I wanted to go tonally, and I figured, why not just start side B how you started side A, with a 1-2 punch of raucous energy, with Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except Me and My Monkey and Birthday. The former being another glass onion, a sort of buffer between tonal styles. It just carries the weirdness of Revolution 9 and harnesses it in like just a rockier leaning jam. That then kicks into Birthday, a song that's a little more normal. It's got some fun piano stuff in it as well that just kind of, again, carries the energy while shifting the tone ever so slightly. And I carry the energy from Birthday and the positivity into two groovier-centric tracks in the form of Don't Pass Me By and Savory Truffle. Don't Pass Me By because it's a Ringo song, and what Beatles record isn't complete without a Ringo song. You know it to be true. And Savory Truffle is another fun George song written about Eric Clapton and chocolate. I think they're both really good songs that sort of carry the vibe without the energy in a similar way to Glass Onion, but a little more potent because there's two of them back to back. And they act as a buffer because Helter Skelter acts as the last shot from the cannon before the record sort of peters out from there. But I like the songs. Again, I felt like I needed to include Don't Pass Me By because Ringo. And while I like some of the other songs that George wrote, I feel like he also kind of got left dry. And I do like Savory Truffle. I think it's a fun song that, again, adds a little bit of weirdness and some buoyancy and some brightness in the sounds that I think are kind of important. Plus, it's more instances where there's more accompaniment in the track listing, like what was heard on the fancy strings of While My Guitar Gently Weeps and the swells in Glass Onion, along with the buoyancy scene in Martha My Dear. You know, it just adds more to the dynamics and the sonic palette of this project. Before getting even more raucous again with Helter Skelter, another Beatles song that is pretty popular from this era. It's got that throttling guitar. It's got that meltdown. It's got blisters on your fingers. It's another Beatles moment that I felt like needed to be on this for a handful of reasons. But from there, we've got the last payoff from all the planting we've been doing as far as the Revolution stuff. Now, I had originally this later in the track listing, but I feel like the energy from the guitars, the sort of meltdown post Ringo's screaming, bleeds really well into the beginning of Revolution 1, and it acts as sort of a come down from the climax that was Helter Skelter. You know, Helter Skelter is a point where everything that may have been pent up throughout the record winds into this melting sort of moment before Revolution 1 comes in and sweeps that away and pushes you into Good Night, another soft, string-driven song that lulls the listener into a sense of comfort. It's a soft jam that then bleeds into the closer, which I didn't originally have this on the album, but when looking at all the songs that were recorded during these sessions, I felt like if I was going to add Revolution, I should also add Hey Jude. And it acts as sort of the credits roll of this album. You know, it's again, easily maybe the biggest song from this era. It's Hey Jude. It's regarded as one of the best non-album singles of all time. It's an incredible jam. You all know it. You all know Hey Jude, and it's the roll credits moment for my version of the White Album, because it's a great song, it's a great single, and I think with how much na-na-nas are going on, it acts as a really good showstopper. So, it stops the show. Now, I cut a lot out of this record. I cut 40 minutes out of the White Album, and there's some songs, I'm sure, that are very beloved by some of you watching that aren't here. And I mean, I get it. There's some soft moments. I cut a handful of the soft moments on here. Julia, I cut. I think Julia is one of those songs that I just don't really like from the White Album. It feels like a song that It walked so Amnesiac can run, and that's not necessarily a slap to the song. I don't hate it completely. It's just when compared to other aspects of the record, I don't like it quite as much. Why Don't We Do It on the Road is a track that feels like it was done better on Abbey Road, possibly. Like, it feels like a proto-Abbey Road song for sure. And I think that it's good, but it just didn't fit the pace of the record that I had going for it. Tracks like Wild Honey Pie, Bungalow Bill, and Rocky Raccoon also just didn't fit the places I took the record. They're a little more of the wackier songs, and while I tried to keep some of that in place, a handful of those cuts ended up getting scrapped off the cutting room floor. That's why Obladi Oblada didn't make it into my version of the White Album. While I wanted soft moments, I cut stuff like Your Blues or Mother Nature's Son or Long, 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 even though they, again, have their own sort of quirkiness to them, just because they didn't fit the pacing. And that's ultimately was my biggest focal point of doing the White Album like this, was I needed it to have a pace, a structure, you know, and a lot of these tracks, while important to components of the Beatles sound or the overall showing off the tumultuation that might have strewn through recording this project, I cut it because I felt like I made room for better songs / did it for the sake of pacing. And if one of your favorite Beatles songs didn't make it on my version of the White Album, I'm sorry. But if you have your own Redacted of the White Album you'd like to share, I'd also love to see it in the comments down below. If you did like this episode of Redacted, be sure to give it a like. Thank you again so much for loving this show for 3 years. I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. I've got a multitude of ideas for this show, and I hope that you'll join me along the ride for them. If you do want to join me on the ride and want to see more of my music, gaming, and general notary content, please be sure to subscribe. Special thanks to my patrons as well. I'm putting up a poll on there, or there's a poll that went up on there earlier this week, on the day that I filmed this, just helping me decide my next discography review, which will be coming out next month. So if you want to help participate in that, it's linked in the description. I'm going to go, though. Thank you again so very much for watching and for the support on here. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.